It is July 3rd, 1863. General Lee has already thrown a left and right hook at the Union line at Gettysburg. He's gearing up now for a final blow at the Union center and left. He will send Pickett and Pettigrew across an open terrain and field from his line to the Union line across the way, a little over a mile stretch, in what will be known as the Pickett-Pettigrew Charge. And it will start at 4:30 in the morning. And where we are today is at the high water mark of the Confederate charge of Pickett and Pettigrew. And today, I bring you Witness to Gettysburg by Richard Wheeler, on loan from Second Time Books in Mount Laurel. I will be reading a few passages on what took place on that fateful day. Now, this charge is going to consist of over 12,000 Confederate men, and they're going to be hitting against a strong Union center where Robert E. Lee believes is actually weak. So he has a cannonade go off at 4:30 in the morning, and they just bombard the heck out of this line. Little do they know that they're actually overshooting it and missing a lot. Yes, there are going to be casualties from this, but they are not going to be able to tell just how little the effect of the cannonade did. It just alerted the Union troops. And they wonder why the artillery of the Union didn't go off. They're about to find out when they get close enough to the Union line. And in Witness to Gettysburg, it tells stories of the soldiers of what took place. That way you can get a better idea. So, on we go. On page 239, it says, Confederate Artillery Chief Alexander was providing as much support as he could muster. I rode down the line of guns, selecting such as had enough ammunition to follow Pickett's advance, and starting them after him as fast as possible. I got, I think, 15 or 18 in all, and went with them. The 18 Federal guns were back in the cemetery, adding to the storm of shell bursting over and among our infantry. All of our guns, silent as the infantry passed between them, reopened over their heads when the lines got a couple of 100 yards away. But the enemy's artillery let us alone and fired only at the infantry. No one could have looked at that advance without feeling proud of it. But as our supporting guns advanced, we passed many poor, mangled victims left in its trampled wake, one with the most horrible wound that I ever saw. We were halted for a moment by a fence, and as the men threw it down for the guns to pass, I saw in one of the corners a man sitting down and looking up at me. A solid shot had carried away both jaws and his tongue. I noticed the powder smut from the shot on the white skin around the wound. He sat up and looked at me steadily. and I looked at him until the guns could pass, but nothing, of course, could be done for him. Union General Carl Schurz, who watched the Confederates from a position on Cemetery Hill, was absorbed by the scene. The alignment was perfect. The battle flags fluttered gaily over the bayonets glittering in the sunlight. Through our field glasses we could distinctly see the gaps torn in their ranks and the ground dotted with dark spots. Their dead and wounded, some of our shells striking right among the advancing enemy and scattering death and destruction around. But the brave rebels promptly filled the gaps from behind or by closing up on their colors, and unshaken and unhesitating they continued their onward march. So far, not a musket had been discharged from behind the stone fences protecting our regiments. Returning to Confederate Lieutenant Finley of Pickett's division. Still on, steadily on, with the artillery fire growing more furious and deadly, our men advanced as we neared the Emmitsburg road. The Federals behind the stone fence on the hill. Cemetery Ridge opened a rapid fire upon us with muskets. Men were falling all around. Cannon and muskets were raining death upon us. Still on and up the slope toward that stone fence our men steadily swept, without a sound or a shot, save as the men would clamor to be allowed to return to the fire that was being poured into them. By this time, the two regiments of Vermonters just south of the zone under assault had swung down the slope and were firing through the thickening smoke into Pickett's right flank. At the same time, Pettigrew, advancing abreast of Pickett's left, was being punished in a similar way by some Ohio troops on his left flank. The fire on the attack force as a whole was coming from three directions. Some of the fire was canister, and the spots where these merciless balls cut their swaths. According to an unnamed Union officer, the Confederate lines underwent an instantaneous transformation in a dense cloud of smoke and dust. Arms, heads, blankets, guns, and knapsacks were tossed in the air, and the moan from the battlefield was heard amid the storm of the battle. The Confederate spearhead had been reduced to only a few hundred men, Lieutenant Finley among them. Just as I stepped upon the stone wall, I noticed for the first time a line of troops just joining upon our left. They were from Archer's Tennessee Brigade and a part of Heth's division. This gallant brigade had been terribly cut up in the first day's fight, and there was but a fragment of them left. Some of them, with us, seized and held the stone wall in our front, and for several minutes there were no troops in our immediate front, but to our left the Federal line was still unbroken. This fact was impressed upon my mind by my seeing our brave Brigadier General Garnett riding to our left, just in my rear, with his eyes fastened upon the unbroken line behind the stone fence, with the evident intention of making such disposition of his men as would dislodge it. At that instant, suddenly a terrific fire burst upon us from our front, and looking around, I saw close to us, just on the crest of the ridge, a fresh line of Federals attempting to drive us from the stone fence, but after exchanging a few rounds with us, they fell back behind the crest, leaving us still in possession of the stone wall. Under this fire, as I immediately learned, General Garnett had fallen dead. Almost simultaneously with these movements, General Armistead on foot strode over the stone fence, leading his brigade most gallantly, with his hat on his sword, and calling upon his men to charge. A few of us followed him until, just as he put his hand upon one of the abandoned guns, he was shot down. Union General Hancock, conducting the critical defense on horseback, was himself wounded in this fighting, a bullet striking his saddle and damaging his thigh. The injury was a severe one, but the general remained on the field. Hancock and Armistead had been the warmest of friends before the war, and Armistead, whose wounds were fatal but not immediately so, made a request that Hancock be given his personal effects for delivery to his family. Now, what would happen is that Armistead will be killed, he will die, and Hancock will be saddened because they were friends before the war. That's the tragedy of the Civil War. What you had here were men who were brothers, be it actual family or friends, fighting one another over certain views of their cause. And for the Confederates, Armistead's death would come as a shock, but they believed that he died gallantly and bravely and courageously. And if I had a friend who had been killed on the opposite side, I'm not sure how I would have felt if I was in Hancock's shoes. But I can say the Battle of Gettysburg saw a few more deaths of friends and family. In the aftermath was more devastating for the civilians, as we will see. Concluding scenes, chapter 20. For the citizens of Gettysburg, the whole of July 3rd had been heavy with anxiety and uncertainty. Late that night, Sally Broadhead summed up the day in her diary. The battle opened with fierce cannonading before 4 o'clock a.m. Shortly after the battle began, we were told to leave this end of the town, for likely it would be shelled. My husband declared he would not go while one brick remained upon another, and, as usual, we betook ourselves to the cellar, where we remained until 10 o'clock, when the firing ceased. We could not get breakfast on account for our fears and the great danger. During the cessation, we managed to get a cold bite. And again the battle began with unearthly fury. Nearly all the afternoon it seemed as if the heavens and earth were crashing together. The time that we sat in the cellar seemed long, listening to the terrific sound of the strife. More terrible never greeted human ears. We knew that with every explosion and the scream of each shell, human beings were hurried through excruciating pain into another world, and that many more were torn and mangled and lying in torment worse than death, and no one able to extend relief. The thought made me very sad, and I feel that if it was God's will, I would rather be taken away than remain to see the misery that would follow. The people in the village came out of their cellars and other places of refuge, and as the day broke upon them, opened their doors. They had been under a reign of terror, although there had been only one civilian fatality, a young woman named Jenny Wade, hit by a stray bullet while baking bread in the kitchen of her home. Actually, her sister's home. During the night, they had suspected a movement of Lee's troops, for they had noted in their places of concealment occasional hurried sounds as of men, wagons, and cannon passing through the streets. But whether these betokened withdrawal or preparations for another attack on the Union lines, it was impossible for them to tell. Now, as they came out of the doors, they cherished new hopes, for they could see no rebel soldiers. All had seemingly disappeared, except now and then, indeed, a straggler hurrying away after his fellow rebels toward the west, or hiding in an alley or outhouse to escape further service in the lost cause. It was almost daybreak, and some of the citizens venture out to stand out on the pavement to watch for the development of events and note what is going to take place. They see a squad of men coming towards them down the main street from the south, bearing a banner. It is too dark at first to tell whether they wear the blue or the gray, whether the Confederates have returned to capture the place, or whether the boys in blue are advancing from Cemetery Hill. The watchers hold their breath in suspense until a moment the dawning light reveals to their longing eyes the glorious flag which the advancing troops are carrying, the stars and stripes, torn with the marks of battle, stained with blood, but wreathed and crowned with victory. On that very morning, on the nation's birthday, 4th of July, 1863, while the troops of Meade planted their triumphant banner on the recaptured heights of Gettysburg, a similar scene of victory was displayed 1,000 miles away to the southwest. There, in front of beleaguered Vicksburg, a great chieftain was waiting to receive the surrender of the army of Pemberton, Confederate General John C. Grant at Vicksburg. That glorious day beheld 20,000 prisoners, actually 30,000, with the vast stores of guns and appliances of war becoming the property of the Union, while at the same hour Meade rejoiced the dawn of the glorious truth that the victory of Gettysburg was the decisive battle of the war. That is great news for the Union. Not only did we win Gettysburg here, not only were the Confederates beaten back at the last measurable attack, Grant out in Mississippi at Vicksburg captured it after so long of laying siege. That bloodshed was over. But Gettysburg and Vicksburg would be the turning point of the war for most people. It'll also be a turning point in the war where things are going to start getting way more deadlier. We're going to see more deaths, more carnage, more ways of killing men, mangling them. We're going to see more men get thrown into the hellscape of war. You're going to see this at Spotsylvania Courthouse. You're going to see this at Cold Harbor. We're going to see this at Petersburg in the coming years and months in this war. But on July 4th, 1863, the Union is in high hopes, high confidence, while the Confederacy has to go back to the South with Robert E. Lee and lick their wounds. And that's where we end today. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next. Have a great day.